There is a panel. You see, I'm not alone. Originally, there were going to be questions and answers, and I was wondering how we're going to answer questions when we really haven't heard all the speakers yet. But we've changed that, and we're all speaking for a few minutes. I've got a massive 7 minutes and 12 seconds left. And I'm going to introduce the panel. I'm going to tell you who is here and what they're going to be talking about. First of all, we've got Josh Sigurdson, who's from Winnipeg. He's the first one here. This young man is amazing. He has the nerve of the devil. He can go out and confront anyone about anything, and he is fantastic. And a little while ago, he caused great embarrassment to the Prime Minister of Canada, and I could hear the cheer nationwide for Josh. It was wonderful. So I'm going to start by introducing Josh.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to be here. Another round of applause for Edward Goodliff. He does incredible work. Now, I'm Josh Sigurdson. I'm from World Alternative Media. I started the media about 4 years ago, and I'm going to tell you a little bit of why I did so. For years, I saw just vast propaganda in the mainstream media. It was to such a level that I felt someone had to do something, but nobody was doing anything. There were some people in the underground, back then anyway, there weren't that many people around. It's growing all the time, which is a good thing, but initially there weren't that many people. And I figured I have to be the change I wish to see in the world. So I'll give you a few examples of how the mainstream media is one of the most insidious, disgusting, sickening organizations, I suppose you could say, on the planet. When I started, I hosted an activist event. Because I'm an opinion host, I don't make any I don't make any statements that are otherwise. I have my own opinion, and I'm proud of it. And I went to an event to cover it, and what I saw was incredible. We just talked, had a good time, and I went home that night and I turned on the TV. I like to know my enemy. And what I saw on the TV was quite interesting. Their story was a group of activists yells at autistic children at an autism march. Now, I was there. That didn't happen, for one. There was an autism march walking by, and we waved politely, and we continued our event. But they reported that we confronted a bunch of autistic children. Think about that. They made such an insidious lie about just people who are standing there, minding their own business, talking about politics, or the lack thereof, I should say. Now, I'll bring you forward a little bit. I did an interview. I shouldn't do these interviews with mainstream media anymore. I've learned my lesson, but I did an interview with a channel called CTV in Canada. They wanted to know about water fluoridation, and they knew that I was doing a lot on that level, on that topic. And I was talking about hydrofluorosilicic acid and how it attacks your body. It's not medical grade fluoride, it's industrial, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They asked me questions for about 25 minutes and gave me statements from known university, dental science, I don't know what you call them, academic, I guess. And I debunked every single thing he said with my own scientific papers. That night on the news, they showed 5 minutes of him speaking, and they showed 10 seconds of me saying, I want to get fluoride out of the water, and then went on to claim they debunked me. Now, the best one, I think, would have to be earlier this year, about 3 months ago. Edward Goodliff went into it a little bit. I've confronted the Prime Minister of Canada on several occasions. First was in 2015, 2 days before the election. I almost got tased, It was a fun time. I enjoy these kinds of high energy kinds of things because someone has to ask these people questions. And what happened was just a couple months ago, I found out at the last second, late at night, that the Prime Minister was in town to speak at a daycare. That's appropriate. And I decided at the last second, I'm going to go and confront him. So what I did was I had very little sleep, didn't eat anything, didn't have my coffee, which you don't want to see me without my coffee. And I showed up to the daycare, and for some reason, they gave me a press pass. I don't know why. I was going to just confront him on the street. But for some reason, they gave me a press pass. So I went in and, dog's angry again. All right. So I got into the event. I waited about 4 hours and watched the Prime Minister do a photo op with a bunch of 4-year-olds playing with Play-Doh. I thought it was kind of disgusting, but I kept my mouth shut because they're 4 years old. I'm not going to yell at him in front of a bunch of little kids. I don't want to traumatize anyone. Once the kids left, we had a press conference, and I went up to the media at the event. We had a microphone to ask him questions, and what they told me was that you have to ask one of these questions on this list. Who would have thunk? And so most of the media, well, all the media except for myself, I should say, agreed to ask him the scripted question to which he had a scripted answer. So I said, I'm not going to do that. They told me to stand at the back of the room. I stood at the front. And they started asking questions, and between one of the questions that our state-run CBC was asking the Prime Minister, which he had a little paper in front of him to read off of, I shouted out my question. It was on the carbon tax. I asked him, how do you justify poor people having to pick between heating their home in the winter and paying for food for their family? And he said, sir, please be quiet. I'm talking to somebody. And then went into a rant in French to someone else. I asked again. I asked a third time, a fourth time. The media... Well, not the media. The security guards started shoving me into the wall, grabbing me by the throat. It's normal when you question a communist. Anyway, so I continued to ask him the same question, and they wanted to throw me out of the room, so I bided my time a bit. I pretended I couldn't find my backpack with all my equipment. I saw it right over there, but I told them I couldn't find it. And so they ensured that I would find my bag before I left. So I kept throwing things back at them, and eventually they slammed me against the wall, grabbed me by the throat, threw me out of the room, and at the last second, I spoke my mind and I called him a scumbag. So, and I told him, shame on you and your globalist counterparts. It exploded pretty big in the news. I should say it was probably a good thing that I yelled at him a little bit and called him a name. I wouldn't usually name call, but hey, it got the issue of the carbon tax in the news across Canada. It was the biggest story of the day all across Canada, which a lot of you, thank you. A lot of you might think, well, what do you even talk about in Canada? Well, not much, but it was still the biggest story. Now, interestingly enough, there were about 45 mainstream articles written about me. Only one of them was original. The rest were copied and pasted. The Huffington Post, the Daily Caller, I'm going to call out a few of these guys, the Daily Beast, CTV, CBC, Global, Fox, surprisingly. And I'm not going to go into all 45, but there's 45. I'll leave it at that. And all of them claimed that I swore at the Prime Minister in front of a bunch of little children. No children were around, folks. Not anywhere in earshot. And I don't really consider scumbag a swear myself, but I'll give them the benefit of the doubt on that one. But the point is, they made a false claim. And that isn't surprising to me. At this point in my career as independent media, I've gotten quite used to these people falsifying stories and trying to deep six you. And every single time they get rid of one of us, there's 10 more that take our place. And there is absolutely nothing they can do to stop this idea from growing, of individual liberty, of truth, of freedom, of free markets, individualism, voluntarism. I can go on. This message will not die. So I'll let you know what I basically do. We do a lot of video reports on free markets, on freedom, with myself and my business partner, John Snyson, who is here tonight. He's on the Freedom Force Council. I do a lot of videos with my friend John Dowell. We call them the Two Johns, and they do incredible work, and it's just genius people. They get what I miss. And we do a lot of reporting on free markets, economies around the world, hence world alternative media. Our biggest audience is in the United States because Canadians, well, they're a little bit behind the curve on the issues of statism. I think they quite enjoy it. In fact, I'll just throw this out there. Just this week, since I've been out here, they passed a bill that said it was, if you called a man, you're assuming their gender, even if they're a biker with a big beard and a leather jacket. If you call them a man and they get offended, you can go to jail for several years for a hate crime. That's where Canada's at, folks. You can tell I'm pretty happy to be down here. Now, I've done lots of confrontations. I basically shooed the Premier of Manitoba, basically our version of the governor, out of power. He was head of the Socialist Party, also known as NDP. We confronted him at his office several times and gave him a hard time until he was almost crying in our last confrontation after a debate where I asked him a simple question and his handler shoved me into the wall and elbowed me in the throat. This is what happens when you question politicians in Canada, and probably most of the United States as well, I would assume, because it's not that different. Statism is statism is statism. It begets more collectivism. It just grows and grows, and you make it smaller, and it just grows bigger. That's why the issue is statism in general. I've also confronted several Bilderberg members. I'm sure many of you here today know of the Bilderberg Group. Confronted finance ministers and people of the likes, and we have interviewed almost every major name in the liberty movement. And we continue to constantly strive to not just report the story, but be the story. We get involved to the point where we are kind of entrenched in the story. And I have to give Mr. G. Edward Griffin kudos for his incredible work. Ron Paul recommended his book several years ago, The Creature from Jekyll Island, and I read it. And I know many of you are here because you were woken up by Ron Paul. Clap if you were woken up by Ron Paul. And many of you here today are woken up because of G. Edward Griffin. You can go ahead and clap for that as well. And they deserve the kudos because they have inspired generations of people, and it's a domino effect. What it really is, it's a domino effect. You wake up a few people, and you end up waking up thousands because it grows. The people you wake up, just one of them, on an average, wakes up 3 people. So I just think my message here today, before I get off stage, I only have a few minutes left, is that we need to be the change we wish to see in the world, and we need to be the media. We need to report what we are seeing, whether that be the radio, the internet, because the dinosaur media is falling. Only 6% of people polled today say they actually trust the mainstream media. Now, I will put out there that still about 50% of people are socialists in the United States as well, in the big cities. But that isn't to say that they can't be fixed as well. There's that old saying, older people fix things, they didn't just buy something new. I think we got to learn from that and start fixing these broken people because they need to learn that collectivism is slavery and individualism is freedom, and the true democracy that they look for is within the free market system. The free market is where you get to vote with your dollar for what you want. And there's nothing more beautiful in the world to me. I'm an unapologetic capitalist, and I think we need to speak louder because too many of us whisper to our friends what we think and are afraid to say it to those we know disagree with us. We are afraid to say it because we think they will criticize us, argue with us, and maybe stop being our friends. Well, so be it. The only way we will win is when we throw apathy to the side and spread the message of individual liberty. I do that every way I possibly can. It's exhausting. I work 18 hours a day to put out videos. And sometimes I'll work really hard and it won't reach many people. Sometimes I won't work that hard and it'll reach 100,000 people or more. But the point is, you have to work hard on it. You have to do whatever you can in your power, because someday people will thank you for what you've helped them achieve. And someday we will see a brighter, liberty-oriented, individualist future where we won't be extorted time and time again by the gigantic state. The ship of state is still sailing and it needs to sink. And that's all I will say for today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Josh. That was magnificent. And for anyone who didn't quite catch it, it's World Alternative Media, is that correct?
That's correct.
And John Snyson over there is his partner, and he's on the Leadership Council of Freedom Force International.